Hi, everybody. It's meteorologist Joe Cioffi here on this Tuesday night as we are actually recovering from what started out as probably not the best day of fishing for me, as I had some real issues with my line and my pole and a few other things, but then it really smartened up and I did land, and it was quite the fight, but I got to show it to you at the top. This is a king salmon, and there it is. And it was every bit of 20 pounds. The thing was huge. And a few people have asked about this. The salmon run upstream on the Salmon River toward the hatchery as they are ending their life cycle. So they come in by the thousands, and they spawn, and then they die. What I do with the fishermen that are on here that fish in this particular area, which is the Douglaston Salmon Run, is most people practice catch and release, and that's what I do. But the other thing is, you'll notice how dark the salmon is. Actually, when you get them out of the water, they are silver in color. But as soon as they start to lose the oxygen, they begin to turn black. Now, what we do is minimize the time out of the water. So we get them out, we take our picture, and then we reoxygenate them by a technique where you put the fish in the water and basically point it upstream so that the water is rushing into its gills, and they quickly get reoxygenated, and then they can go on their merry way. But I'm a very happy guy here. I actually had 3 big ones that I fought with today. So this is the one that I landed. There was one after this that was even tougher. Now, this took me, I think, almost 20 minutes to land. The other one, I was at it for about 20 minutes. I was exhausted. And plus the fact that I was doing it in 90-degree heat, which is really unusual for this time of year. In far upstate New York, on the east shores of Lake Ontario. But if you ever want to do this, I highly recommend it. If you fish, this is so much fun and a lot of work. And by the way, hooking the fish, getting the fish on your line is the easiest part of the equation. It's the landing that is the challenge. There are fish everywhere, and you really, at times there's so many of them, not always, but at times there's so many of them, all you got to do is drag your line through the river, and a fish will grab it. But sometimes there are fewer, obviously, and it's a bit tougher. But the skill here is really in landing, and I am just at the very beginning of learning it. So I had a great time. I highly recommended it. If any of you are interested in a guide, I can recommend a friend of mine, very, very highly. His name is Derek Wood, and he is out of eastern Pennsylvania, but he knows the Salmon River like the back of his hand. Okay, and so just message me if you're interested in that, and I'll give you some more information. So let's talk about Hurricane Maria. Maria, now it's very interesting. We're going to look at, actually, Maria is not a hurricane anymore. It's a tropical storm. So that's the first correction I need to make. And when we look at it on the satellite view, on the visible satellite view, you'll notice that if you look closely at the clouds, you can see that the clouds to the east have much higher cloud tops than the clouds to the west. And this is a result of the fact that Maria has been slowly weakening over the last few days. There's shear going on. So much of what's on the northwest side is mostly low and some mid-level clouds. The convection and the thunderstorms are all to the east of the center. So at first glance, you look at this and you say, oh, look, there's a fairly impressive circulation. But in reality, the storm is getting very distorted, and it is weakening. Now, there have been some bands of rain coming into the outer banks of North Carolina, and actually some of them have pushed inland, but they're really nothing to speak of in terms of causing any issues, of course. And the winds along the coast have been gusting to gale force. I've seen some gusts into the 40s. And the ocean seas just offshore at some of the buoys running at 18 feet or more. So, the ocean's really getting roughed up in a big way. Now, you can see this better, actually, on the enhanced view of the satellite here. And there you have it. And you see how that whole, the northwest and west side of the storm, for the most part, has very little with it. There's dry air in here, actually, that's been entrained. So there's very little going on there. And, it's as if somebody just kind of cut this whole part of the storm out. It's just getting very distorted and elongated more northeast, southwest. So, Maria is pretty much done as a hurricane, unless it winds up firing up a little bit as it moves out across the Atlantic, which it might do. But I'm not really, certainly from the standpoint of how Maria is behaving, there has been no change in this. So we're going to just move it right along. And in the meantime, tiny Hurricane Lee is about to become major Hurricane Lee. You can see how well developed Lee is, but you can also see how small it is. I mean, here's 28 north, and here's 32 north. So basically, the storm is only maybe about 250 miles across, and we still, last I checked, the gales on this were only going out about 30 miles from the center. So let's see if that's changed. I'm suspecting that, if it expanded ever so slightly, but it really is just a tiny system. Yeah, I mean, the gales have expanded a little bit now, 50 miles to the northeast, 50 miles to the southeast, 40 miles to the southwest, and 40 miles to the northwest. And hurricane force winds are actually 20 miles to the northeast and 15 miles southeast, southwest, and northwest. So it's basically the size of an urban county zip code. It's just very, very small, and it's not going to have any impact on land anyway. I just figured I show it to you because it is going to eventually kind of get pushed out to the northeast. It's currently moving to the west, but it is going to get pushed out to the northeast as Maria carries it along. And you can look at the forecast model, hurricane model track guidance, which is really not that actually. Tropical Storm Maria, that's the GEF's guidance. I'll show you that, the hurricane track model guidance first. It's really amazing though. Sometimes you get these you get weather models going in all different directions with these tropical systems, and with this one, it's been really well behaved since it moved out of the islands and moved away from Puerto Rico. A very tight cluster of tracks all to the northeast and out. And it'll probably hold together in some fashion or gradually become extratropical, but this might wind up being a threat eventually up into parts of northwestern Europe if it hooks up with low pressure that's out in the Atlantic. In the meantime, as far as Nova Scotia and Newfoundland is concerned, no issues there. It passes well to the south and east, so you really don't have to worry about it. And the GFS ensembles are pretty much in the same boat here. You can take a look at those. And you can see all pretty tightly clustered. They get south of Iceland, and then a couple of them do some weird things. But we're, at that point, it's long gone. So why don't we take a look at where we are going to go with the models and with our forecast outlook for the next couple of weeks as we march along. And I think we could take a look at what's going on nationwide for today, because we're finally going to have the tropics quiet, at least for a little while. Although I think that they are going to fire up again. We're going to get about a week break here for the most part, if everything behaves itself, and it better, because I'm tired. I'm still tired. So you can see the date and time here on the there we go. So we'll move it along. We'll get Maria out of the way. And you can see it's edging to the northeast, kind of meanders a little bit until Thursday morning. And then by that time, this cold front pushes into the eastern part of the United States. We finally get rid of all this record high temperatures that we've been having. My God, it got to 90 up here, as I said. And fishing in that with your waders on, it was just, it got exhausting. Now, there's going to be a secondary, two things here, by the way, as we go into the weekend. Friday night into Saturday, there's a secondary front. I just backed it up to Friday. There's a secondary front that's pushing southeastward from the Great Lakes. And you can see it here with this area of showers. And behind that will be the coolest of the cool air. That's going to move in for Saturday, and the large area of the Northeast will be in the 50s and 60s for daytime highs. Also, by the way, there's low pressure that may try to develop off the Florida East Coast, and you can see it there. The model's been doing that for a couple of days. We'll have to watch that. It doesn't do too much with it. There may be some shear issues going on with this, so it really doesn't develop it as it kind of moves it across the Gulf of Mexico. But we'll just have to watch and see. Sometimes weather models, particularly the GFS, doesn't really handle these things all that well, and it moves along. So at this point, I want to jump off to the western part of the United States, because we've been neglecting you folks in the West for so long, and we really do want to pay attention to these things nationwide, because what's in the West affects the West, and eventually what's in the West winds up affecting the East. We've had this cool air and in some cases colder air, and you can actually, again, with the next weather system coming into the Pacific Northwest. Let me back it up, though. I just want to kind of set it up a little bit. Let's just back it up to the beginning. So, here we are for Wednesday afternoon. You've got rain down in the southern Rockies and probably some heavy thunderstorm activity going on, even a little bit of snow being indicated in parts of southern Colorado there. And that rain area moves to the northeast. You still have, local monsoonal effects that are going on this time of year, but you're starting to get these weather systems. Of course, we've had these steep trough in the west, and that's brought in quite a bit of weather over the last week or two. And we've got some more snow that's possible up in the northern Rockies. Doesn't look like anything too big. And then the model does want to generate some rain out into the plains and moving into the Midwest with the next cold front. And then the next weather system comes into the west and brings some rain and snow here. So now we're at day 8 and 9 in the long range, which is October 4th. And going forward, of course, remember our rule here: after the 6th or 7th day, models can become a bit squirrely, but it does look like an active pattern in the west with weather system after weather system coming along. And here, actually is cold enough for some snows into the Rockies come around October 9th or 10th, if you want to believe it. You can also see, by the way, some kind of system coming out of the Gulf of Mexico on this run and moving into East Texas. Who knows if that's right or not, but it does maybe indicate that the tropics may try and fire up at some point. So why don't we look at the North Atlantic view? And I know you guys are there on the chat board, so don't worry, I haven't forgotten you. I'll come back at the end and we'll address some questions, and I'll say hi to everybody. Let's just to wait for all these maps to load. They usually load backwards, where the the later time frames come in first. And I'm also dealing with a slow internet connection here. And by the way, big thank you to Levi Cowan at Tropical Tidbits, because we use his maps religiously, and they are great. And thank you so much for allowing us to share them. Really appreciate it. All right, so they're almost loaded. Again, I apologize for the slow internet time, so I can just kind of jump on here. We'll just jump on here to tomorrow afternoon, and we'll march it along. And you can see Maria and Lee moving to the northeast, and there is a big low that's near Iceland, so it'll either get absorbed by that. That's probably what will happen, that low will just absorb all of that and then move up toward perhaps England, Norway, Sweden, and those countries eventually. So that looks like they could get into a pretty good storm, a pretty strong storm system. And then here in the east, if you in the Western Atlantic, as we go later into the long range, again, pressures are going to be low in the Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico in the longer range. So models are going to be firing up things left and right at that point, but where they are and how they react are two totally different things. And of course, all of that is going to be dependent on the upper air, which we're going to look at now. And we'll take a look at the jet stream. You know what? I got to tell you, it's nice that I'm getting some semblance of normalcy here. We're kind of going back to when, the tropics weren't busy and kind of dominating, the entire weather video here. So that's a good thing as far as I'm concerned. Let me just get this 500 height anomaly map correct. and we'll just have to wait for it to load, which is going to take a little bit of time. Again, sorry about it. This is where I'm staying, so you know, this slow internet connections are just what they are. So basically, you know, we've had this trough in the west. What you're looking at, the map that's already up, is from day 10. So there's still another trough in the west at day 10. And it looks like, you know, there's going to be some kind of ridge in the east that's going to build again to some degree, but perhaps not as extreme as what we just went through. Okay, so I think I have enough of this here so I can roll it back to tomorrow. So here you have the features. Yes, you could see the trough that's over the Great Lakes that swings out of central Canada. You've got a ridge now in western Canada, a little ridge up in southeastern Canada, Maria offshore, Lee to the east, and a system in the southwest, a little upper low. That trough in the east swings by with that secondary push. In comes another trough into the western states. So once the trough in the east lifts out, the ridge is going to try to build again next week. Builds kind of strongly, but not to the way it was, maybe for a couple of days, and then a weak shortwave will go by. Still more troughing in the west, general ridge in the east and across the southeast back to Texas and southwest from there. And the model wants to swing another deep trough out in the west by days 11 and 12 and a big ridge of high pressure in the eastern states. So, you know, over the last several years, we've seen this tendency for, you know, the summer to kind of get extended a little bit into September and early October. We've been having these ridge in the east patterns in the early part of the fall for the last several years or longer. I'm not sure why that is, but if it is your perception that autumn has been delayed over the last couple of years, your perception is correct. The upper pattern has been more in line with something you'd see more in the summer than in the fall. On the other hand, also remember that in the meantime, in the western part of the United States, you've seen, if you've got a big ridge in the east, you're going to have a deep trough or troughing in the west, so it's going to be cooler than average there. So they've had, you know, cool, very cool autumns that have started early and have started fast. I mean, areas in the northern Rockies already have seen their first snows. You know, it's not uniform, and I want everybody to remember that as much as we may think we're the center of the universe, the weather universe, we actually aren't. And I'll just show you, by the way, the total snowfall that's being forecasted out for the next 10 days. And, you know, you do see a scattering of snow up in the northern Rockies, but there is extensive snowfall that's being forecasted by the GFS anyway, for much of northwestern and northern Canada on over to Greenland and up into Alaska. So what kind of impact that has on the long range in terms of the winter, I have no idea. And I don't think anybody really does. And of course, everybody's going to be focusing on snow cover growth in Siberia. So if you want to take a look at that for the first time, I'm going to see if I can find that site. Here it is. This is the Asia map. So we can take a look at snow cover growth. Yeah. Now, what this is about is, you know, there are theories with regards to the relationship between Siberian snow cover growth in the fall and the kind of winters we have in the east. Those theories played well until somebody discovered them, and then that they might work. And then, of course, in the last couple of winters, they really didn't work very well because they you would have predicted a cold and snowy winter for the last two. And for the most part, for the eastern part of the United States, that was not the case. It was a snowier winter for much of the Northeast last year, but it didn't really extend much further south than that. And the thing to look at is the snow cover growth that's south of 40, you know, down to south of 50 degrees north, and on the eastern and southern flank. It's the snow cover growth in this area that's fairly important, and then it gradually expands to the west. So we then start to focus in on the western flank as well. So, you know, we're very early in this. It is the month of October that is the key month that folks who hold on to this idea watch. So we've got a ways to go as far as that's concerned, because we're not even into October yet. So it really won't be till the end of the month. And it's the rate of growth in the snow cover and not necessarily the total snow cover that is looked at. So that's just an interesting little sidebar that we are going to probably focus on to some degree over the coming next 6 to 8 weeks. So let me just give a collective hello to everybody. No, I'm a Giants fan, Tim Gora, and up until the start of this season, no matter how bad the Giants have played, we could always say that we're not the Jets. But they've been god awful. So I'm not. I wore the hat today because I had to. It was just too hot, and I needed something to protect my head. I have not, Dottie, had enjoyed a fish fry yet. Again, I caught catch and release, so I don't keep it. And actually, that fish, by the way, once they get into the stream and they go into spawning, their bodies are degenerating, so the meat isn't actually very good. It's very bland, very tasteless, and when you catch the fish when they're in Lake Ontario before they make their run, it's different. It's a much hardier meat, but once they move upstream to start spawning, they stop feeding at all. They stop feeding altogether, and their bodies just begin to break down. The first thing that breaks down is their stomach, and then after that, their whole system just basically rots away. And they're chasing flies not to eat them, but they see them, or anything that they see in the water. I mean, you could put a sponge and color it green or red or whatever, and they'll go after it. They will chase everything because they see it as a threat to their eggs. So that's what they're actually biting. They're not feeding, except for the Atlantic salmon, because the Atlantic salmon actually make a return trip and go back out. Let's see. I hope this trough in the west and ridge in the east doesn't stay for winter. Well, Pandaz, I got to tell you, the ridge in the west, trough in the east scenario in the fall has been kind of a mainstay for the last few years, but that doesn't stop it from flipping at some point down the road. So I'm not really, from a standpoint, if you're a snow lover, I wouldn't really be too concerned about that. I might be a little more concerned if maybe the other way around, if you had a deep trough in the east and a ridge in the west, that might wind up flipping. And that has happened. We've had winters where we've had cold falls going into December, and then suddenly the pattern flips, and then the winter months are just mild and relatively snow-free. And Raymond wants me to acknowledge, yes, the 90-degree temperatures. July and August didn't even hit 90 in Albany, New York at all, and now they have a 3-day heat wave up there in September. Go figure. But sometimes weather does work in funny ways. Hi to Jacob. Good to see you here. Boston looking. Delvin is like fall is far again this year. Another ridge in the east. Yeah, it does look that way. That ridge in the east, trough in the west, is a scenario that is probably going to be with us for a little while. And by the way, that setup will also probably extend the tropical storm season. So don't be surprised if we wind up with several more tropical systems. And a great thanks to thank Anthony Orr, who also keeps us up, make sure we get our stats right when it comes to tropical systems. And by the way, I didn't even realize this, but for all the talk of all these these storms and the landfalls and everything, in 1933 we had 20 storms in that season. 15 of those storms made landfalls. 15 of them. That's an astounding number. So, from that standpoint, we're not close to that yet. So, that is quite a formidable number to achieve. So I don't know if we may have a high number of landfalling storms if you count the tropical systems that we had prior to Hurricane Harvey. So, but we're not at 20 storm season total yet. So let's see where this goes. Yes, Aham, Puerto Rico in a very, very sad state of affairs. I mean, it is, it's horrible what's happened there with what Maria did to the island, and it's going to be a long, long time before their infrastructure recovers, and of course the people there recover. So, we wish them all the best, of course, with regards to that. It's going to be very, very tough. Let's see. How do you feel about the statement that winter's more in 2-year sections? So, for example, 2 years of a lot of snow, 2 years of not that much snow, and this year, if this is correct, we'd be in a snow year. Well, Pandas, I think that depends on where you are. For example, here on where I live on Long Island, for example, we've had 5 consecutive above normal winters in a row in terms of snowfall. Okay, not necessarily in terms of temperature, but in terms of snowfall. So 12, 13, 13, 14, 14, 15, 15, 16, 16, 17. 5 in a row of above normal. All 5 of those winters produced 40 inches or more, and we had 4 in a row that produced 50 inches or more. So I would tend to think that and by the way, it's also, I believe it is now 7 out of 8 that have been above normal and shooting for 8 out of 9. So that's never happened. And 6 in a row hasn't happened. I don't think 5 in a row has ever happened. So it's kind of long in the tooth for Long Island, just as an example. Now, those numbers, there's a lot of variability in terms of snowfall. So you have to really kind of look at the geographic areas and look at the climatology to see where that works and where that doesn't. It's very hard to make kind of a broad statement because, there's so much variability with regards to who gets the snowfall and who doesn't. So, and if last winter, at least for my area, proved that you could have above normal temperatures and still have, major snowfalls occur, that was indeed the case. We had 2 1-foot-plus snowstorms that came right after record high temperatures, which was just, astounding. We had temperatures in the 60s, and that one in early February, we had temperatures in the 60s with record highs. And then New York City got a 9-inch snowfall the next day, and that I was told that was the first time where you've had that combination. I think you had temperatures even in the low 70s. It was low 70s in some places, as I remember. So you got to kind of look at how it goes, and the snow projections, especially. Okay, here's the thing, and I just want to make this clear. I'm really not going to get into too much specific outlooks for specific areas because it's just, it's really an exercise in total frustration with regards to, forecasting it. I have no idea. I don't think anybody has any idea. You're not going to know that until the pattern, sets up. And even then, because of the variability that you're going to have in the atmosphere. So, for me to even postulate, or theorize on just what kind of snowy winter is going to happen for any part of the country is just sort of a waste of time. But what we can do is look at the patterns that we have and see how, what that means for the short and medium range. I think that that's probably a wiser way to approach all this. Okay. Let's see. Yes, Albany, New York, Raymond. You got delayed that March blizzard last year from just inland of the coast in southeastern New York. It was just an absolute burial. That was quite a snowstorm, indeed. Do I think Puerto Rico is not being covered as much as Harvey? I don't know. I haven't been watching the news coverage because I've been on vacation, so I haven't really been paying attention to it, to tell you the truth. Veronica Bazanka is on, and a hi back to you, Veronica. Thank you for the congrats, my good friend. Veronica and Phil, you might know Phil Buzz from my Facebook page. He is the All Shore correspondent, formerly the North Shore correspondent, but he went South Shore-ish, so we call him the All Shore correspondent, and my good friend. And I will be back Sunday, which is good. I'm having such a blast up here, by the way. And in fact, the fish have been unbelievable. Okay, let me just show you guys it for you latecomers. This is what I caught today. This is a king salmon, and before anybody gets bent out of shape, I catch and release. And by the way, you should know too that this part of upstate New York is very poor, and a lot of the people that live in this area actually rely on the salmon run to stock their freezers with meat for the winter time. So this is a very important thing for this particular area. It's been depressed for many, many years. There's not much industry up here. There are not many jobs. You basically either work for Walmart or the power company. There's some local businesses, of course, but it's very, very, years ago there were a lot of tanneries, factories, and so on up here, but those are all long gone. And so it's a very, very poor part of upstate New York, but it's also a very, very beautiful part. There's a lot of farms here, and Lake Ontario is just gorgeous. So if you've never been up here, you certainly can put it on your list. If you're a fisherman, you want to do this. Fran, there's the fish, so I have it up there for you. And Andrew Nagy, yes, I know you can't stand the heat. It will be done after tomorrow. We'll probably be in the humidity will go down on Thursday. We may still be in the mid to upper 70s, low to mid 70s on Friday, and not out of the 60s on Saturday. So you're going to love the weekend, because Saturday and Sunday probably won't see temperatures much out of the 60s. And Saturday night's going to be nice and cool, with most areas down in the 40s. So you can enjoy that. Frankly, I'm kind of looking forward to some nice autumnal weather myself. So we will see it. And then, of course, remember, the tropics, in my opinion, are not done yet. So we may wind up having, a few more tropical storms in the mix for us to deal with. Is it possible for a nor'easter to make landfall? For some reason, I never see that happen with snowstorms in the winter. Well, Ryan, there's a tendency for tracks to be offshore. Sometimes they're just inland. Sometimes they do run. There are, there are instances where we've had storms develop that track just offshore and then move up inland, as you say. But for the most part, they either stay offshore or they're just inland. So, but it does happen. It does happen from time to time. A lot really depends on the upper lows and how they swing out. They do have a tendency to want to swing out to the east and offshore, so that usually keeps the surface lows offshore rather than onshore. But everything is different. All right, folks. You know what? We're going to call it a night. I hope everybody had a great day. If you like summer weather, you're in your prime. If you don't, you're not very happy. So I can understand that. So check out my latest website posts on meteorologistjoecioffi.com, Angry Ben on nycweathernow.com. You can also, and I'll put a link up on after this video loads up into the video library, just so you know, I do have now a little Joe Stradamus shop. So if you want, and I'm going to be adding stuff to it, but I've got some mugs there and a few t-shirts. So if you're interested, the link will be up there later on. So, go right ahead and check it out. Okay. But please don't feel obligated to. Anyway, have a great day and a great Wednesday coming up. Get ready for the cool weather that's coming and the break in the tropical activity. If you're out in the West, enjoy your cool autumn that has gotten underway. And if you are in the Canadian Maritimes, you don't have anything to worry about with Hurricane Maria or with Hurricane